Listen up, you lucky bastards. Grab some eyeliner and tell your hairdresser you're coming in hot because it's the Corax, Is He a Goth or Is He an Emo episode of the Large Blast podcast. I'm your host, Stoney. I'm joined, as always, by Welshie.
You will be delivered.
And Matt.
I'm pacing the pews in a church corridor.
And we're here to talk about all things Warhammer 40k. You know the score, and we like to get things kicked off, as so many other podcasts do, with a little bit of hobbies goings on, where we talk about what's been happening in our hobbies world. So, who wants to go first? Welshie, do you want to go first this time round? Let us know what you've been up to.
Yeah, sure. So, I've been painting my kill team when I've had time since we last spoke. So, my new Death Guard kill team to add to my many kill teams, painting them in the old style Death Guard, so cream with a bit of green rather than the kind of cartoon green that we get these days. I'm almost at the point of just rusting the hell out of them and grinding them all up, so that's going to be good fun, because normally I try and paint quite clean, but
yeah, that old school paint scheme for those original Death Guard guys is fucking cool, actually. The creamy colors.
Yeah, I really like it. Much better than the kind of bright cartoon stuff, more kind of dark. But then there's lots of nice pink worms coming out of all the gaps in their armor, and I've converted some. One of them's got like an insanely large axe that I've converted up that's going to be rusting to pieces. So, looking forward to that. But aside from that, I've just got back from holiday. I've just been away to land of the not quite Templars, but the Knights of St. John, Malta. Crazy history. And whilst I was there, like we like to do, spread the word about the podcast, I was looking for a Games Workshop. There isn't a Games Workshop on Malta, so there's a gap in the market, I think. GW, if you're listening and you want 3 guys to move out to Malta and run your Games Workshop franchise, then let us know. But what I did find was the craziest hobby store, little store called K Hobbies, which I said I'd give a shout out. If you happen to be in Valletta, go to K Hobbies, because it is like stepping into a time warp of Warhammer. I went to the back of what is essentially just a toy shop to find rack upon rack of blister packs all the way back to 1993. So I have bought some blister packs sealed with air with the little sponges. I've got a few from the kind of grey and green 40k era, so that kind of middle era. And then I even picked up a Khorne icon bearer in the black, red and yellow blister packaging. Do you remember?
Holy shitballs.
Yeah.
The old school stuff when they only had so many colours they could print out on one piece of cardboard. That's insane.
Exactly, yeah. And the Khorne fella with the big old skull in a Khornate kind of symbol. They had metal battle sisters there. I picked up an original battle sister, Repentia Superior, the woman with the whip and the real pointy like Madonna boobs. I got Matt a little metal steel legion present that he can paint up. I've got another friend something else, but that's going to be a secret. But yeah, I managed to pick up a few little bits in there. And I might even do a little video of the trip out to this store, because the people in there were really friendly. And they did make me laugh. They said, "We love the Warhammer, but working with Games Workshop is hideous." And I said, "Yeah, we have problems with them as a company sometimes. Not all the time. We still love them." And his reply was, "They should be in the Ukraine. That's what they deserve."
Jesus,
like,
strong feelings about it. This is a decades-long feud going on with Games Workshop, apparently.
But I do feel like they can be difficult for small independent retailers to work with. But anyway, if you're in Malta and you're in Valletta, get yourself to K Hobbies. The guys in there are really nice, and it is like a time warp. It made me want to buy out everything and scalp it all on eBay, but I resisted the urge to leave it there, leave some treasure there for old people. He said they've had people there from Canada. It's got its own Reddit page. People flown all the way there to buy stuff. They used to have, up until last year, he said they had the original Warhammer Castle. They had the Empire Knights starter set for old world Warhammer.
Why did he keep buying so much stock? Why did he just like this is like stuff from all over the time period. It wasn't like he gave it a go. It wasn't like, oh, he's got a bunch of 7th edition stuff. This is like 20 years worth of back stuff he's got.
Well, then we noticed the second shop that has all the modern stuff too, and like a painted display, a really nice Knights display, some Forge World models. So him or someone that works there is clearly into Warhammer, but yeah, it was a great experience to then buy this Warhammer and then walk through a like 16th century 18-meter deep walled bastion to go and have like a sandwich with these old school blisters in the pocket. So I've probably gone about that too long, but yeah, it was great fun.
Oh, well, that's cool. Well, there you go. Hidden gem in Malta if you fancy getting out there and seeing this shop there. Matt, what have you been up to? Tell us what's been happening in the world of Matt.
I had a game of 40k yesterday. That was good at the Dice Saloon.
I saw you play again. There.
Yeah, that was good with Alex. So shout out to Alex. The night before, I played some Blackstone Fortress, and the day before that, I was doing something else Warhammer related that I can't remember. So I've had like quite a full-on Warhammer last few days. But prior to that, I have been. A week ago, I went to the Dice Saloon Bring a Buy, or 2 weeks ago, however long ago it was, which is the first one I've been to. They've done it before at our local gaming shop in Brighton, and actually, it was really good. I managed to get the new Creed figure, the new Lady Creed, for 20 quid.
Nice.
Someone was selling it cheap already. I got £8 off. I don't know why, but they had loads of shit. They had, so I went along at about 10:30, 11, but you can't start buying until 12, which I'll remember for next time. But they had boxes of free, like Lord of the Rings standard infantry. There was free stuff. I mean, obviously there were loads of board games. There's loads of Warhammer. There was so much stuff. I don't know what I was expecting, but I'm definitely going to the next one, and I recommend that any of you guys do as well. It's really good. Yeah, some good deals there. People selling like whole armies.
Wow,
it's kind of weird. And I also actually was kind of, there was some really old Warhammer fantasy stuff, and I went into town while I was waiting for it to actually be able to be buyable. But I was kind of checking on eBay and kind of thinking to myself, if I buy that for 18 quid, how much can I sell it for? But in the end, I didn't do any of that. But I have been doing lots of eBaying recently. I found a really good eBay seller, Speedy Trading, but actually he sells everything cheaper on his website. And I've got some really, really reasonably priced Bretonians. So that's really good. And selling loads of stuff on eBay, just trading. I'm basically this year, something I haven't really spoken about, I don't think. And I guess I was kind of sick of the propaganda, tying in with our last episode of Games Workshop, with this constant sales pitch that I feel like I'm being pushed. Basically, I'm not buying anything unless I sell something on eBay. And the money is, so I'm not investing new money. That's what I'm trying to do.
Do you remember at the start of the year when I said I was trying to do that? I should confess to listeners that yesterday I received the sort of Soul Shackle box and also an entire Chaos Battle Force. So I have definitely succumbed.
Been really fucked up.
Yeah, I nearly ordered a load of stuff. I know we were talking about it when we were all together the other night last weekend. I nearly ordered stuff because of the sales price increase that's coming up. And then I just thought, no, I don't need it. I've still got my piles of shame are still shameful, and I just 6% increase, whatever. I'll just buy the figure in a year's time when I can actually buy it and paint it. I'm sick of buying stuff and putting it in a drawer for like a year or 2 years. I hate that. Finally, I just wanted to also give a shout out. This was something cool that I saw. Was the crew of the Royal Navy research ship HMS Protector tweeted some images of a 40k game they were doing on the snow by the British Antarctic Survey Rothia Research Station. There was
Games Workshop picked that up. Did you see, Matt, on Warhammer Community?
Did they? I didn't see that. I didn't see that. Oh, excellent.
Warhammer Community. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad they did, because I thought that was quite cool. Yeah.
Of course they did. It was all a publicity stunt by them. That snow ain't
I got caught up by their propaganda.
How about you, Stoney? What Warhammer have you been doing?
Not very much. I've just been sat here thinking smugly about how this price increase is not going to affect me because I've got a 3D printer. So that's the only Warhammer really that I've had time to do, is just sit atop my smug 3D printed tower on my throne of resin.
It's the news. Wow. It's the chuffing news.
Have you heard? 6s are now 4s.
It's the news.
Gene Stealer Limo's back.
News.
So news, we've already kind of touched upon it, but it's time to get those wallets out and kiss your money goodbye, because we've got price hikes coming, 6% on an average model. Be prepared for that, I guess. How do you guys feel about this? I suppose that we always kind of knew it was coming because everything's getting fucking dearer now, isn't it? So it's so it sucks, and especially when like Games Workshop it's a bit of a luxury. Well, it's a complete luxury item anyway, isn't it? I mean, it's not like so for it to get even more expensive makes it even more of a luxury, which is shitty in these times of need.
Yeah, I think it's already an expensive hobby, isn't it? And it has gone up. I've just, like I say, bought a load of stuff that's going to tide me over for a while. 6% is almost, we're buying stuff for the average local gaming store that can manage to sell products for 10% less is basically just wiping that off, which is where most people are buying their products these days. I know the big gaming stores are doing the 20% off, but I know our local one can only manage 10. Yeah, I guess things are getting more expensive, but then Games Workshop is continually in the news about how great the profits are and how great it's doing all of the time. And
maybe and to be fair, I mean, maybe there are things that GW could do to make their models a bit cheaper. Maybe we could hollow them out a bit more or some shit, shave a few pennies off. Who knows? But it, like we say, it's an expensive hobby. It's known for being an expensive hobby. So it's...
I have to say, I had a bit more of a cynical view on this. I think it goes back to everything, and I've said this a number of times for the last 2 years, for basically as long as we've done the podcast. Every couple of months, basically every quarter, Games Workshop does something. They bring out something big and new, or they do something. I guarantee you, this isn't a price increase, or at least they've timed this price increase to hit the end of year quarter for this financial year, and they're just trying to rack up the money that I guarantee we've talked about the suits before. In a couple of years' time, Games Workshop's going to be sold business, because everything they do is to rack up the success and their margin for every quarter. That's all, and it's just to make good.
I mean, that's not really a hot take, is it? I mean, they are a business, and they that's kind of the goal. Yeah,
but I don't see any other reason for this 6% hike. We had a price increase last year.
Yeah, and
I don't think anyone would argue that. Yeah, I mean, no one's. But that's what businesses do, is they make more and more profits each year, isn't it? That's what they're supposed to do. So if they
people keep buying it.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's it exactly. It's not Again, maybe I'm talking about this from a smug 3D printing point of view again, but
my view of this is whenever they do this kind of thing is, okay, let's assume that there is a genuine financial reason behind it. Let's assume that it is the fact inflation here in the UK is topping 10%, and that is genuinely why they have to do it. They could save people money in so many other ways with online rules, with there's other ways they could make the hobby cheaper if they do genuinely have to put the plastic up, that they could come out at the same time and say, you know what, we're putting them up, but actually come 10th edition, codices are going to be free, or something like that. The fact that we'll talk about that in a second because it's rumored, but starter sets still being cheap is my last point. Well, get people hooked.
That's gonna that's gonna be how it works, isn't it? It's like they're gonna their sort of justification for it, I guess, would be, it's as expensive as you want it to be, because you could buy, you buy a starter kit. Sure, it is kind of dear. It's like, what, 30, 40 quid or whatever for like a little box of dudes, and you're like, and you just enjoy painting them. And then all of a sudden you're spending thousands and your house has been remortgaged and you're living in a house thatched with plastic sprues. We've got a hot lead here at the LBP about some new stuff that's going to be happening in 10th. So what kind of stuff can we expect? Apparently, hearing through the grapevine, through our LinkedIn.
Well, I don't know if you've seen these, Matt, but there's a couple of big changes. We won't go through it all. It's been covered better elsewhere, but the Lion seems more and more like it's going to close out 9th edition, and then we've got 10th very soon after.
So it's rumored we've got a book coming called The Lion.
Yeah.
So
and that will come with a model.
That seems pretty key.
So yeah, we've seen it in all of the teasers, and we've been predicting it since podcast episode 1. We wouldn't suggest another Primarch would come out. I'm sure we all agree that we've only ever said The Lion. But the very exciting for me is that the rumor is that the launch box will be Dark Angels versus Tyranids, and that the Dark Angels will be generic Space Marines that I can paint as Ravenguard. So another starter box. I got the Necrons and the Space Marines in last edition. Sounds like I might be getting some Space Marines and some Tyranids in 10th to kick off, which is exciting. Even though I just said I have too much grey plastic and I'm not going to buy any more for ages because of the 6% price hike.
I do have a habit of always getting the launch box, so I probably would as well. But I just won't get anything until that. Maybe the Rogue of Dawn tank. I don't know. For me, I feel like it's too soon. I feel like the game actually is pretty balanced. One of the codexes has just come out. They've got loads of delays in production at the moment and shipping. The Khorne codex has just come out, and they're talking about 10th wiping the slate clean. And I think that 3D printing and a 6% price hike at the beginning of 2023 is good in the short term for that quarterly target, bad in the long term. They got to change what they're doing as a business.
Slow it down.
Yeah.
But the most exciting thing from that little bit of info is that we might not have to look at blue Space Marines on boxes come 10th edition, which would just make me very happy.
Yeah.
Rules wise, though, they're saying it's going to be streamlined, which means they just take out all of the bloat and then they'll put it all back. We've been through all this before, boys. I mean, this is the 9th time. Psychic phase and command phase combined, that might speed up the game. One less phase. But the big rumor that's really got to me, the one that's angered me, everything else I've just kind of letting it wash over me like a stalwart boulder being broken to a small pebble over 9 editions. But the thing that's really got to me, if it's real, is that toughness is kind of going, is the rumor. The second dice roll might be being played with. The stalwart of Warhammer for eons. Heavy armor will be a thing for things with heavy armor, and everything else will just be one less dice roll. I don't know if that's real. It's still a rumor, but that's a big change.
Yeah, it'd be kind of strange if they got rid of toughness, because it does, I don't know, seems to signify toughness quite well. You know, like you say, having a roll to see if your toughness does anything.
Yeah. That is really at no point during any game if I thought, it would be much better if I didn't have to roll these other dice.
Yeah. I mean, it would be quicker. I mean, you can't deny that if you're just rolling a hit and a save,
I mean,
it's quicker, but it's less. I don't understand why they seem to have. If this is true, I mean, this is all. If this is true, we're going to eat our words. We're getting angry over nothing. But if they want to make the game simpler, take out the 100 stratagems, take out the stupid number of rules, take out the fact you need to carry 4 books to the dice saloon with you, and let us roll loads of dice. That's what we like. Do we like rolling loads of dice? Don't take the feedback that it's too confusing and take out a really simple mechanic. Yeah,
that'd be really weird. I mean, you may as well just not play, because you just put a load of models on the board, roll. One person rolls 10 dice to see if you hit them and how many times you hit them, and then the other person rolls that many dice to just see how many didn't die.
Well, yeah, I'm sure that there must be I'm sure they wouldn't just be like, hey, what happens if we take toughness out? They're like, yeah, great, that sounds good, stick it in the book and let's get it out of here. You know, there must be like, I'm sure they've thought of a kind of alternative or whatever. Maybe there's some kind of like weird complicated chart you've got to roll on now, or like one of those like a wheel like in the game of life that's in the middle of the table now you've got to spin around, or some dumb shit.
Can you imagine if they go back to a slightly like unbalanced lookup table like 7th?
Yeah.
And then the other thing, Matt, you're going to love this after moaning about how fast everything's coming out. They also, in this big drop of rumors, is that we're getting new codex for Dark Mech, which is, I mean, I fucking love Dark Mech, but how soon is that coming? There's already loads. New Xenos race, unknown Xenos race.
Yeah.
I'm hoping for Thrud. But
I heard somebody talking about this. This seems like a lot of stuff that we're hearing about, a lot of big things. Like I feel like this stuff should, like we said a bit, just be sort of spaced out a bit. It's like they look how long it like before all of this stuff started kind of like really coming out every fucking 5 minutes, like the distance in time between a Primarch showing back up in 40k and then all of a sudden it's like we've got new armies, we've got old armies renewed, we've got like all kind, I don't know, it's like let the fucking Voltan guys get a bit established before we get another new race.
Who
knows whether these are real or not. I'm all for a more streamlined game, but let's make it more streamlined by removing the reading, not the rolling.
Rolling in my 6-4.
Who would have thought a man that calls himself the chooser of the slain could be considered either emo or goth? But we're going to find out which one he is today. That's right, Corvus Corax means crow or something in Latin, I think. But either way, he is emo or he is goth. We don't know. Welshie, do you want to maybe take us through your thought process a little bit with what's going on here?
Yeah, so what we're going to do is take a look at the Primarch of my legion, Corvus Corax. It's about time he was in the spotlight. He's been too long in the shadow. But the real question on everyone's lips isn't, why did he make raptors? Has he found Lorgar? Why does Gav Thorpe love him so much? The real question is he an emo or is he a goth? Because he walks a fine line between the two. So I guess we need to start with some definitions for those that might be older, younger, that one person we've got in our 69 plus age category that might not know what an emo or a goth is. So I've been on the
goth. That 69 guy knows goth.
He's a big fan of literature. So I've loaded up the Large Blast podcast computer and I've asked it what is emo and I've asked it what is goth. And it's given me a short definition and then a couple of quotations, just like you get when you're reading the Black Library for some people that really know. So I typed in, what is an emo? And it said, it's a person who is overly sensitive, emotional, full of angst, adopting a certain style categorized by dyed black hair, tight t-shirts, and skinny jeans. Think dyed fringes, big eyeshadow, checkered belts, and a feeling of outcastness. So that's what we're looking for if we think he's emo. And the couple of quotations it gave me an example of how you might feel if you're feeling emo. And that goes, if you look in the mirror and don't like what you see, you can find out firsthand what it's like to be me. And that's attributed to Remembrancer Gerard Way from Thoughts on a Black Parade. So that's the kind of emo feeling. And then I typed in, what is a goth? So if we want to know what we're looking for from the gothic side, it's a little bit harder to pin down the kind of goth side of things. But the Large Blast podcast computer said, a person that follows a subculture of dark or morbid aesthetic, drawing on influence of gothic music of the 1980s, which was likely inspired by the likes of Poe, Lovecraft, and Stoker. Ill-fated, eternally conflicted characters, victimized by harassing or malicious figures. Think white foundation, big hair, corsets, and black lace. So that's the goth side of things.
Not an orc. It is not an orc.
Not a goth orc. No checkered flags on the goths. That's very much checkered flags is very much the realm of the emo, actually.
Yes.
Yes.
Again, I mean, but goth is quite a blanket term. There's several subgenre of goth, and there's a few checkered wearers in there.
there's definitely some kind of bookends to goth, I would say, and we've got 2 quotes this time actually that kind of take those 2 ends. So kind of early goth, I found in the archives. Words have no power to impress the mind without the exquisite horror of their reality, and that's attributed to poet Edgar A. Poe, source unknown. And a much more modern reference: fleeting and shadowed, thou art privy to my sin, secrets dead, wouldn't thou inflict cruel daylights on my skin? And that's attributed in a Gothic romance by iterator Mr. Daniel Filth. So there's 2 ends there to the Gothic period that we might want to go down. Okay, so what we're going to do is, because he's got a long and winding life, old Corax, I'm going to give you some chunks. We've got about 8 chunks of history, things that have happened to him, things that he decides to do, and we just need to discuss whether we think they're particularly gothy or particularly emo. And then we'll have a big chat at the end and pick, if he was around today, what subculture would he fade into? All right, so early life then. He was found on Lycaeus, a moon planet known as Kievar. The moon was populated by mine slaves. So it was a whole mining forge world, but the slaves were all kind of criminals from the main planet. So if you got convicted on the main planet, you were sent to the mining moon, be you a political prisoner or just a general criminal, or even if you were just shit at your job on the real world, which is the main kind of forge world for the area, you were sent to the moon.
What if your job was being a miner on the other place?
Yeah, well, even if you were a shit miner,
they'd send you to another mine. Like, fuck you, joke's on you, I'm shit here as well.
Yeah.
Well, they kind of, some of them were a bit shit there, and they didn't like being enslaved on the moon. So there was a kind of resistance that started forming on Lycaeus, on the moon world. And obviously they found this pure white baby at some point. And a slave girl is the one that found him, and they raised him up, and he started growing faster, as primarchs tend to do. And they called him the Deliverer, not because he wanted to become a postman, but because everything he did worked out well. He was a natural born leader.
Cool. There's something I just wanted to touch on there quickly before we move on, Welshie, which I think is very important to our conversation about whether he is a goth or whether he is an emo. And that is, you mentioned that he's very white, right? And he's not good in the sun. Is that also correct? Because I feel like those are both way more goth traits than, I mean, if I've seen some summer emos and they look, a little uncomfortable, but more or less happy. But if you ever seen a summer goth in one of those big fucking trench coats with that pasty ass skin, that is not a happy person. So I think that is for sure points to goth there.
Okay, the pale white skin. Okay, we'll notch that up towards goth. So what he manages to do, because he's always delivering the right thing, is that he starts to form some fight teams as he grows older, starts to organize the resistance a little bit better, promotes the right people to the right places. People do what he says because he's obviously huge and just appears from shadows without anyone really understanding why. And he basically brings down the entire moon. He takes out the planetary defense force with subterfuge, brings down the moon. The main planet, Kievar, then kind of does a return attack. But whilst they're return attacking, he's already planned to blow up the 5 main cities on the main planet. So as they land and start attacking Lycaeus and try and bring the resistance down, he launches an atomic bomb on all 5 of the main cities simultaneously on Kievar, which brings the tech guilds and the mining guilds down and plunges the world into civil war, and all the free slaves become free and kind of hack the world to pieces. And then he decides that because it's collapsed, what he's going to do is he's going to rename the world's Deliverance, which is where we now know the Ravenguard hail from. So that's the kind of first little story, his early life, his teenage years, if you will.
Well, those are when we are at our most goth and most emo, is the teenage years. So what do we think that series of action falls under? Is it? I mean, he's so emotionally pissed off that he sets off a bunch of bombs. That's quite emo, right? It
is not just any bomb
to haunt him.
Yeah,
it's atomic bombs. Just blows up cities.
Yeah. I can imagine
as
that
you'll
being
see as we go further on, becomes like a kind of crystalline point where he's kind of, whether he becomes a bit hypocritical later on with his judgment and his goodness, when actually in his past, in order to he had to murder, well, hundreds of thousands of people. There's definitely some angst there, some angst that I might put in the emo category potentially.
I could kind of imagine a dashboard confessional song about blowing up an entire city because you were pissed off about something.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got maybe his like kind of natural appearance is the gothic side, but his early emotions might kind of get the better of him.
So far, yeah. But then it's also like maybe he's over romanticizing as well. You know, maybe it is like, you know, this is Warhammer 40,000. There's a million slave moons, right? He's the son of the emperor, the god of putting people on slave moons. So who knows? Maybe, like you say, maybe there is a bit of hypocrisy, but maybe it's too early to say. With so far 1 point apiece in the emo and goth section. So
I'm with you there.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next little bit of his story then I've entitled Meeting Daddy. So we know that when you're a teenager rebelling, whether you're going down whatever subculture you're going, it might be due to nurturing guidance from your parents, taking you under their wing and pointing you in a particular direction, or rebelling against them. But the day that he sets off all these bombs just happens to be the day that Daddy arrives. So deliverance is delivered, and here, lo and behold, here comes Daddy. Not early enough to have done anything about it, but just there to watch the carnage. And apparently they disappear for a day and a night and come out, and the Emperor's trying to get him to join the Imperium. And Corax says, only if you help me bring peace to Kievar. So he has a bargain in there that it will only happen if he brings peace to Kievar. And Daddy says, yeah, no problem. We can do that. We'll bring peace. I've got these really nice guys that are properly into Forge Worlds. They're called the Mechanicum, and they'll be arriving tomorrow. So the Mechanicum arrive at one of the biggest, most industrialized, futuristic Forge Worlds in the Great Crusade, and just kind of move in and make home. And it all seems to settle down a little bit. Whether it stays like that in the future awaits to be seen. But there was a cool fact there that I thought you might like, Matt. You might be able to tell us more because I don't know very much about them. That he actually meets with the Mechanicum, and the Ravenguard only work with one Mechanicum group, Griffin 4.
That's a Forge World. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So they only interact with the Mechanicum of Griffin 4, and they're given more independence than most people, and they don't actually hand over all of their technology. So a lot of their stealth stuff stays in the hands. They have this
stealthy flyer, don't they? Okay. Yeah. That's yeah. I didn't know that, but yeah, that is a Forge World still. Yeah, in 40k.
Yeah. So yeah, they have like things called the Whisper Cutter. They have all these kind of designs.
They have like a Thunderhawk version, don't they?
Shadowhawk. I think.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So he's coming up with all of these names: Whisper Cutter, the Shadow Hawk, and whether that's making you think one way or the other. And then he obviously builds the fortress on Lycaeus that becomes the Ravenguard version of the rock, called the Raven Spire. So we've got a Raven Spire. We've got I'm not going to work with just all the Mechanicum. I'm only going to help you if you help me, Daddy. Yeah, and I'm calling everything after shadows.
Yeah. If anyone wants me, I'll be in the Raven Spire.
Yeah. But he gets the Emperor and him get on though, don't they? They have.
Yeah. At this point, I think it all goes down pretty nicely. So my personal feelings at this point is things are going
I don't know,
more towards the goth, I'd say, but it might still be too early.
I feel like definitely the Raven Spire, that is goth through and through. Like having just having a section of having anything you own and calling it the Raven Spire. If it's like, I'm going to the shed, it's the Raven Spire or whatever.
Yeah.
Like that's true goth, I reckon. So I feel like that's pretty gothy.
Point to goth then. Well, we know that one of the most important things when determining what subculture you're in is your appearance. So I thought this would be a good point before we move on with the history to think about what he looks like, what he wears, what kind of swagger he has, what's his fashion sense. So he's got this jet black power armor that's called the Sable armor, because they don't just call it black; they need to call it like a specific kind of darkness. And the Corvidine pinions. So he's really starting to lean into the whole kind of raven bird type aesthetic at this point, which is his massive jump pack, which is really cool. And I think Stoney, I'd probably say, could maybe form some kind of parasol were he to need to take a short trip across an open square. And then his weapons, which I think are really cool, and what is kind of disappointing in the Horus Heresy Forge World model, that his one of his main weapons is this 3-headed power whip, which he has is it's like a cat and 9 tails, but it's only got 3 tails. This kind of massive whip, but his model doesn't have that. But apparently he carries that in order to always remember the slave masters of Lycaeus.
Right. So, okay. Yeah. I think these are a lot of these are goth points to me. I think, like we say, because emos, they're not typically all black. They like a little bit of color in the hair or something, or there's usually at least like a red shoelace or something, whereas it feels like the all black aesthetic is a bit more goth. I like what you're saying about the parasol. I think, do you reckon he was talked out of his initial thing was like cartoon style, where he was just going to have a big umbrella, and they're like, well, I'll fool with the umbrella like a parachute or whatever. And
like the penguin.
Yeah, exactly. Like the penguin, like Danny DeVito or whatever. But then they had to build his ring, the big wings instead. And if it gets really hot, you can just hang a rag between them, and it gets shadows out, keeps the sun off his neck. But so either way, I'm getting very you guys can tell I'm a pasty ginger man, because I'm getting very obsessed with how he's going to take care of himself in the sun. So
okay, well, anyway. All those points are definitely quite gothic, but there's one thing about emos, it's that they like to maybe do their nails, potentially nice long painted nails, perhaps. I think that could without going too far, but into the cutting,
a goth as well.
Cutting potentially.
Painted nail.
Okay. Yeah. Well, he has the lightning claws known as the Raven's talons. So those are his big, massive slice and dice lightning claws that are designed specifically for him by a combination of Griffin 4 and the artisans on Kiyama.
Yeah. I mean, that's more like Moon Ninja than anything else, isn't it? Really, like that piece of information on its own, getting your own like claws crafted for you in a goth or emo sense of the term, is just like, that's a new level of being an anime kind of nerd, which I think is quite emo. So maybe
I think that is maybe yeah, for sure. Also, he likes his oversized weapons. So apparently, when he's not using his pistols in close combat, which are kind of Archaeotech pistols, his favored weapon is actually a heavy bolter, which he just holds in one hand because it's a Primarch. So nice. I think is really juxtaposed to everything else about him being really stealthy, that his kind of favored weapon is to just hold a massive heavy bolter.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're not always stealthy, are they? They're still space marines. They're still got to get down and dirty. And sometimes, and if you're just in there just shooting a bunch of bastards, then why not just grab a nearest heavy bolter and fucking wield that fucker around? So yeah, fair play to him.
Okay, cool. So that's kind of his gear, but then his kind of way about him and his abilities then, what he calls wraith slipping or shadow walking. So this is his kind of psychic-esque power that he has as a Primarch, his ability to kind of disappear into the shadows. So I was thinking more kind of, where might that be better in terms of social circles? I'm thinking maybe like hanging out with the emos down the skate ramps, just kind of fading into the underneath of the half pipe, smoking a doobie.
I mean, both shadow step, what they called shadow stepping and
shadow walk. I like shadow stepping. Yeah, that.
What's it called? Well, they both sound like kind of
slipping.
They both kind of sound like sort of color goth TikTok dances, like kind of like emo type things. So
I mean, this is coming. My when I think of emo and goth, I'm thinking like 2005, 2006 when I was experiencing this. So I'm thinking these are like names for poses that people were doing in the mirror and the selfies on MySpace. You know, with like fake lip piercings and stuff.
Just putting my snake bites in so I can do a quick wraith slip in the mirror.
What do people use? People used to use magnets. Yeah. Now they use them in Warhammer.
Well, I think on fashion and abilities, we've kind of gone straight down the middle again. Maybe we've ended up with some kind of anime goth in this section, which is confusing the issue more.
But then maybe, like we say, there's different genres, isn't there? So I mean, there's not is there an anime goth? Not necessarily, but there's definitely like, you know, kind of cyber goth. Is he potentially kind of cyber goth emo? But then they're quite colourful as well, and
really
dancey.
colourful,
They seem a bit more social than your standard checking out at the Cradle of Filth concert. The guy who you meet there is going to be quite different from whoever you meet down the fucking hard bass rave.
Yeah.
Well, I reckon that half a point to emo on this one then. So back to the history then. So Daddy's been and they've had a chat. They've taken Kievar, you know, they've sorted it out. The Mechanicum's moved in. Everything's looking rosy. He joins the Great Crusade. And that means interacting with some other people. He's been in the limelight for the whole period of time up until this point. He's been numero uno. And suddenly he's paired up with Horus of all the Primarchs. So renowned for planning and sabotage, lightning strikes. He's put together with a guy that's basically known for spearhead, full-on brutal assaults into whatever comes his way, and unsurprisingly, they don't get on that well. Also, because Corax is pretty late to the party, that's another kind of thing. It's 10 years into the Great Crusade by the time he's even found and turns up. So they've got a bit of headway.
And being late, more of an emo thing than a goth thing, I reckon. Goths, they've got a pocket watch usually, something like that. They're always on time.
And a monocle to read it, perhaps.
Exactly.
So he's paired up with Horus, and he's starting to think that he doesn't really trust his Terran-born members of his legion. He thinks they're too into terror tactics, and he's not into terror tactics. He's into good deliverance, you know, like coming in and liberating people nicely, giving them the option to be free. But a lot of his Terran-born sons are like more into just standard warfare, and that's not his bag. So he wants to get rid of them, but he doesn't really know how. And he chats to Horus, and Horus also has some issues with his Terran-born fellas. And luckily, they've got a war called Gate 42, the Battle of Gate 42. And Horus sits down with him and says, look, I need you to send in your men and just brutally just assault this gate. And Corax is like, no, that's not really me, mate. I like to kind of dive in from the side, kind of fly in and out. If you wouldn't mind sending your guys in towards the gate, that would be great, because what we'll do is we'll just kind of create a diversion. And Perturabo steps in at this point and's like, so you're just telling us you're too scared to lose any of your own people? You want us to just kill ours? Anyway, goes on like that for a little while. And Corax decides that he's going to have to do it, and he'll send in the Terran-born people against the gate. And lo and behold, they get massacred, but eventually they win. And then he kind of regrets it for ages, that he feels really sad about the fact he's offered these guys up against the gates. And it's not. I mean,
someone must have been calling him on that shit. Someone must have been like, "Hey, where did all the guys that were born on Terra go?" He's like, "Oh, I sent them on that certain death mission." Like,
that's completely kind of the opposite way that we normally fight.
You know, that one time they asked us to do this, I sent them on that one.
You know, there's got to be at least one person left that's like, "Hang on a minute, surely."
So the upside of that for the Legion is that actually, unbeknownst to anyone at that time, a lot of those Terran-born ones were actually part of the lodges. So the Ravenguard actually lose a lot of people that were in the lodges that are all being infiltrated by Erebus and succumbing to heresy early on at that point. So that's kind of wiped out.
Got rid of his chaos element.
Yeah, exactly. But he definitely, from that, stands up to his brothers to an extent, saying, I want to do it my own way. He's very much, no, I'm the way of darkness. I'm going to do it my way. But against Perturabo and Horus, he doesn't really have much choice. So he basically walks away. He has a huff and doesn't ever work with Horus again. He's like, no, I'm done with you, mate. That was stupid. I told you it was stupid. because he just wants to liberate the oppressed. Any remaining Terrans that he doesn't trust, apparently he just sends on quests. So unlike the other Primarchs that just kill them or massacre them, he just sends them to the edge of the galaxy. Just go away, get out of my sight, kind of thing. And this is where he kind of comes first into kind of contact or acknowledgement or knowledge of Conrad Kurz, who he's then endlessly compared to the Night Haunter for the next rest of his life. Because of lots of similarities.
Well, yeah, I kind of wanted to touch on that a little bit as well, because in some ways, what we're doing here is we're not just deciding whether Corax is emo or goth. We're also deciding the Night Haunter, Conrad Kurz, is as well, because whatever Corax is, you know, I'd say that Kurz is the opposite. So, yeah,
there's definitely a bit of that, isn't there? And I've got a quote here actually from Conrad Kurz himself describing how he feels about Corax. And this is from Night Haunter, Guy Haley. I didn't hate all my brothers, but I hated Corax. I had an envy of his mastery, and that's what lay behind my hatred. I haunted the night, but Corax owned it. How much more perfect a monster I would have become, Father, if shadows had loved me as much as they love him. Which I think is quite telling of the interplay between them.
Yeah.
The Horus Perturabo thing was kind of making me think of school, and I don't know why, but like they're all just kind of pushing around the little scene kid, the little emo kids being like pushed around.
Bullied.
Yeah.
He's
got to
getting
do
bullied
it.
by Perturabo's like the big rugby lad, and then you've got Horus, who's like alpha,
bald-headed,
football,
whatever.
This is the equivalent of like, they've got to make him do a speech or something, and he wants to like do the lights at the back or something. He's more sneaky, and they're like, no, you've got to go out there.
Can't we do our English project in interpretive dance?
Yeah. And that's fun. That's funny. That's funny what Conrad Kurz says, because in a way, I don't know. I imagine that like some emo scene kids must look at goths and think like, wow, they're so like they've embraced a whole subculture completely. Their identity is so completely tied up with them. Like I want to be like them, but I can't because I'm an emo kid.
Well, that's it. I mean, I'd definitely say that goth is more of a like culture than like emo is more of a kind of a fashion sense, really, isn't it? And
a fad of phase,
a music phase,
and like kind of like music stuff and that.
Yeah,
but they both kind of spring from this sort of angstiness, which is what not all goth. I guess it sort of comes from it, but yeah.
I mean, we're being very broad and
I think that quote there from old Kurz, that is super duper emo, I would say, which is maybe a point in goth to a point in goth to Corax.
Well, it sounds like we're very very settled on goth point for the Great Crusade phase of his life. Okay, so moving on to the Horus Heresy then. This is the next time Corax really comes into contact with Horus. He's kind of off doing his own little skirmishes, doing what the Ravenguard do best, dropping in, taking out planets very quietly, causing changes in government, etc., until he's called away to the Istvan system, where the Ravenguard actually play a massive part in successfully liberating a lot of planets there. Until, of course, Istvan 5, which we have a whole separate episode on if you want to go back and listen to, but the Drop Site Massacre. So the Ravenguard land as still loyalists on Istvan 5 and basically lose the vast majority of their entire army when the traitors turn on them. They're right at the forefront, moving into the Depression when the traitors land behind them, and they're basically sandwiched in completely and massively gunned down. There's not enough shadow to hide in as they're being shot from both sides, and it's huge, devastating to the Ravenguard. But Corax is there. He's not killed like his brother Ferrus Manus is. He's on Istvan 5 and he goes fucking nuts. He goes full rage, loses it. All of his kind of stoicism and poetry is utterly gone. Darkness descends on his eyes and he goes mad. and he just butchers word bearers left, right, and center. There's a bit where he's ripping Gal Vorbak, the top, the kind of possessed
half demon-y
people.
guys.
Yeah, he's ripping them apart limb by limb by hand because he's just like forgotten that he has claws attached to him. And this is where him and Lorgar come together, and it's one of the best Primarch fights in the whole Horus Heresy. Lorgar sees his men being butchered, his like favorite dudes as well, the Gal Vorbak, and even Lorgar gets pumped up, runs in. He's got his big old swinging mace, whatever it's called, his weird rhythm stick. Gets to Kurz, gets to Corax, starts fighting Corax, and Corax absolutely wipes the floor with him. Like slashes his face, then mocks him, saying like, "You're going to remember that forever." Then gets his other claw and jams it right through his guts and is like lifting him off the ground, ready for finally kill him. Doesn't even do too much of a kind of whispering speech, is just completely lost in rage. And it's described in one of the books. His movement there is described. Once he was in motion, Corax never slowed. A blur of charcoal armor, black blades, carving, chopping, dismembering, without effort, butchering with ease that belayed his ferocity. So he can, when he needs to, just go full rage, full emotion, full anger. And the only thing that stops him slicing Lorgar's head off there and then is guess who turns up? Space Batman himself, and grabs his arm. Conrad Kurz is there to stop him killing Lorgar there and then. And then Kurz, to kind of fulfill your prophecy, perhaps, Stoney, basically Corax flies off. Kurz kind of semi-lets him escape, then tells Lorgar he's a cunt and walks off and doesn't even help him. So yeah, that's kind of what happens to him. Horus Heresy, right? His fan, that is basically his big thing. He almost kills Lorgar and then has to retreat. He only doesn't kill Lorgar because Kurz gets in the way. And Kurz just hates the fact that the Gal Vorbak are there. He looks around and is like, "What have you done, giving yourself to chaos like this? You're an idiot. I'm not going to help you." And just walks off. But I think the rage is very ungoth. When I think of goths, I think of very calm.
Yeah, sure.
Very calm people.
Yeah. But then, there's always that, there's a simmering edginess, isn't there?
Flick a
That's what
switch.
supposedly, there's that kind of, like we say, maybe they've got a samurai sword and they practice with it in the mirror or something. Or I don't know, like you say, we're going back to school a bit now, but like maybe the crazy kid who used to wear black eye makeup and shit. And if you wound him up there was that one incident where people wound him up too much and he like punching himself in the head and stuff and like went skits on some kid or something. So
who knows what's under the trench coat?
I was going to say
that's why they wear it.
Got something under his matrix coat.
It's full of sandwiches.
Okay, so that and Kurz's "I'm not okay" move is going to give him another goth point, I reckon.
But this is probably the least, like you say, this is maybe it's too emotional, but the wrong kind of emotionalness. This rage.
Then maybe it should just be half a point.
Maybe this is more emo. Maybe this is because emo was more coming from like kind of like hardcore, wasn't it? And there's that weird like screamo. Maybe this is so emo it's screamo, where he's like actually super angry and he's gone like full hardcore underground.
He's gone like Bring Me the Horizon's just come out and everyone's gone, "Wow, this is a little bit less whiny and a little bit more heavy."
Yeah, that's it. He's ready to get his rock hair on.
All right, cool. Well, point to emo then for Horus Heresy.
Let's go. Let's give him a point to emo. Fuck it.
The next stage of his life I've entitled Visiting Daddy. After losing most of his legion at Istvan, he decides he needs to go to Daddy and ask for some more. "Can I have some more men, please? Because I've run out of all my men." And Daddy doesn't care. He gets to Terra, and Daddy's so busy fucking holes into the webway that he doesn't even like come out and talk to him. And Corax is like, "No, I need to go and talk to him." And Dawn's like, "No, you can't. You just got to kind of wait here in this dark room. If you're lucky, you might get a vision." And he does. He gets a little vision. The Emperor pops into his head and shows him where the laboratory is. And the laboratory definitely has some links to kind of old Victorian literature. He finds out where the laboratory is that has all of the genomic information for making the Primarchs. And he's basically told where the original Primarch genome is, from which the Emperor designed all of the Primarchs. So he goes to the laboratory, which is in the Labyrinth. He gets this information. He takes it back to Deliverance. And with the help of one of his scientists called Vincenti 6 with 2 X's, no relation to Nicky 6.
Hell yeah.
Retrieves the Ravenguard portion from this genome, because that's how science works. I'm a molecular biologist, and injects it into some new recruits. So that's the next kind of stage of his life. Daddy doesn't seem to care, tells him where some information is. He gets the genome and he goes and does some dark experiments in a laboratory.
Well, this is pretty crazy. I mean, the daddy not caring is as emo as it is goth, so it's hard to really put that in a thing. But the scientific experiments does feel quite gothy, like Victorian style goth.
Yeah,
kind of Frankenstein.
The laboratory.
Yeah. Kind of guy with a lot of plastic skulls, pewter skulls in his house and shit. Like,
I agree that I don't think we can award any points either way for the Emperor and what he does. I mean, in a way, he actually does care, because he gives Corax the location of a laboratory. Like, how many other people does he trust with that kind of information?
Oh, classic abusive dad, though. He's like, throws money at him. It's like, go make yourself busy. I'm too busy to play catch now, Corax.
Yeah, the laboratory thing seems very goth, like a wall of useless test tubes and like
bubbling with dry ice.
Yeah, stuff.
That's what I was thinking, like Nightmare Before Christmas, which is interesting because in itself that scene's very gothic, but it was loved by the emos. You know, we can live like Jack and Sally if we want to. You know?
I think that in the Venn diagram, A Nightmare Before Christmas is that middle section of emo and goth, to be fair, that people love that shit. But like, but also, I mean, what he's getting genes and injecting them into people. Well, you know, they're probably lying down on like a big flatbed kind of thing, and he pulls like one of those big old timey switches, and lightning happens, and like, you know, the guy steps up Frankenstein style.
I would imagine a raven probably caws as he pulls the switch. So
yeah,
I think we're probably going goth, are we?
Got to go goth on that one, I reckon.
Yeah.
What's he doing with this genome then? What's the purpose of this?
Well, he wants to make more Space Marines as quick as possible. And that leads us into the next phase, which is, I've titled here, Dicked On by an Even Sneakier Brother. So part of how he manages to escape from Istvan 5 in the first place is because Alfarius allows it to happen. Because Alfarius has been contacted by the Cabal that want this war to be pretty even as possible. And they're saying, you need to get in the way of Corax getting these extra men, because it might turn the tide against Horus, and we want this to go on. And therefore, Alfarius knows he's got this genome hiding on Deliverance. He manages to get a squad of Alpha Legion, which may or may not include Alfarius, because at least one of them is called Alfarius, but we know that means nothing, and stitch dead Ravenguard faces onto the faces of the Alpha Legion so that they can integrate within the Ravenguard. And they pollute.
Yeah, right. Just like, hey Terry, how you doing? Looks like you've got a fucking face stapled to you.
I think there might be some more kind of archaeotech involved than just stapling a face on top just of like your beaky armor.
You can see his mouth behind his lips as they're like flopping around.
I don't remember your nose.
Got like a beard poking out underneath his fucking face.
Well, regardless of how good their disguise is, they manage to get into the genome room and they pollute. They use a virus vector demon blood mutagen to mutate the code that's being put into these new recruits. And this is how we end up with raptors. So the people, the Marines that are what become Marines after being injected with this genetic information suddenly just start mutating. Some of them get genuine wings, some get horns, big teeth, weird hooves, etc. It's all gone kind of tits up. The Alpha Legion themselves don't manage to actually steal the whole genome at this stage, so they can't make their own, but they've kind of polluted the waterhole for the Ravenguard. Kind of Corax's reaction to this is to stop the formation of any of these new kind of abominable Marines, but to still take I think it's 500 to 2,000, the bits I've read, new Space Marines, which is a big force, and still use them. They're not broken enough for him. So what do we think about that as a telling factor? He's using these monsters, but not making new ones.
Force.
This is all getting pretty shady. This is getting a bit chaosy here, isn't it? A bit heretical.
I'm sure we've spoken about this before, but I can't remember when. But it is sort of semi-loyalist chaosy. It's very dark.
In a bit, it definitely would be a shameful thing for the chapter. You would have thought. Are they like proud of this? They go around telling people about all this shit, or is it like the Dark Angels where they're like, "Don't look under the bed. There's nothing under there. I promise."
I like to think it's why beaky armor was invented, because everyone just came out with a really big chin.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that he doesn't just get rid of them, or he still wants to use them. I guess that shows he does care about his Legion. Like the earlier bits where he's sending Terranborn to their death kind of forcefully, but a kind of, I'm doing it because you made me do it. This is very much, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to sacrifice them if I don't have to. Is
he psychic at all? Has he got any sort of psychic abilities?
Not beyond the like warping into shadow.
Right. That's like, okay.
And people forget that they've seen him when they look at him. That kind of thing that happens with the Emperor, where they just kind of like Men in Black style.
Well, that can be quite goth. If you're just like, oh, do you remember that goth guy that was at the party? Never was. No.
Yeah. What?
Like, what? Yeah. Who's that? He looked really.
I like to think maybe he's like. I feel goths are always emos are never really trying to get you on side, whereas goths are always a bit like, yeah, it's like a really cool way of life. Like if you tried listening to Cradle of Filth, like if you listen to more than one song, try listening to the whole album. It's really good. It will change the way you think. Maybe he's using a bit of that kind of convincing people that it's all going to be okay. That the fact he's using more face makeup is, it's all part of it. It's all part of the plan.
I mean, I was just going to say, I don't think it's particularly like strong in the goth direction.
No,
so if we're going to do like a point, it's half a point or one. It's not. It's
hard to say.
Swinging.
Well, that's it. It's maybe more like a kind of a cyber goth type thing where you just want, to everyone to look like a kind of weird mutant type cyber dog or something. So, yeah. Although, to be fair, there can also be like with any of these genres, there's obviously these kind of like gatekeepery type guys.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the thing here. Is it's like in some ways, Ravenguard are super gatekeepery because they're like, oh, I don't like people that are born on Terror and stuff. That's not goth. That's not true goth. If you're born on Terror, you've got to have come from like a slave planet or whatever. That's true goth. Only then can you understand the poetry I've been sending
from the prison.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas, maybe the exclusivity is, and then he's so into, because these are like goths that have been injected with some sort of crazy fucking mutagen or whatever.
Crazy super goth.
He's still like, but they're still goth. Damn it! I don't care. Yeah. They're still goth. So, I reckon this is a point in goth. I'm giving him goth point.
Okay,
right,
goth point is. All right, so the next bit, he's not got that many resources. He's got some mutated raptors. He's got a few forces that he left behind that didn't come to Istvan 5, but he's gathered them all up. And he decides at this point that he's got to make a choice. They know Horus is heading to Terra. Like all of the Primarchs that are out, not really near Terra, he's got to make a choice. What's he going to do with what he's got left? Is he just going to kind of do hit and run and slow people down? Is he going to go to Terra? Is he going to go somewhere else? And what he doesn't do is he doesn't decide to go and save Daddy, which I think is quite interesting. He doesn't take the remnants of the Legion straight to Terra. He decides that he doesn't really want to do that. Maybe he doesn't feel like Daddy helped him enough. So he takes the Legion and he goes to rescue the Space Wolves. Maybe he wants some points with his brothers. The Space Wolves are now besieged on a planet called Yaren 3, surrounded by sons of Horus, Alpha Legion, World Eaters, and Thousand Suns. So they're pretty hemmed in. This is after Russ has been kind of wounded by Horus. So they're holed in, they're surrounded, and he turns up with the Ravenguard fleet, and he meets Bjorn, the Fell-Handed, who's leading a kind of big system of space wolves. And he's like, "Hi, Bjorn, and I know we've never met. We're kind of quite different, me and you. But I kind of want to help you rescue our brother, because it'd probably get me some points, like with the cool kids, like with Johnson and Russ, So he joins them. But what he doesn't really say to Bjorn is that he sees it completely as a suicide mission, and he vows to himself that he'll never be manipulated, and he wants to die with his raptors by his side in glorious, untainted war. So that's what he's basically doing when he goes to try and rescue these space wolves.
So what is his relationship like with the other Primarchs? Is he going to save Russ because he particularly likes Russ, or is it like I don't think he really has a relationship with many of them. He's definitely a kind of outsider. I know he chats to Russ a bit, but that's a bit later, I think. He has a little meeting, which I'll mention, with Russ and Lionel Johnson, but he doesn't really seem to fit in with any of them. He's not like, he doesn't seem to have that kind of either side of the scale, like you have Sanguinius and Horus being together, or like the two sides of the coin with Perturabo and Dawn. It's just kind of him. Okay.
But he's made this decision that he's going to go on this essentially suicide mission, and he's happy to die with his raptors by his side and go out on a high. But at the last minute, he realizes, and this is a complete shift, so I think from one side to the other, that he realizes it's not his right to choose when he dies, and that arrogance is what brought Horus down. And I think that's a real flip from one side of a coin, diving into certain glorious death to be martyred and remembered, to then suddenly come to the realization that actually there are bigger forces at play than oneself.
That was, he accidentally did some Chad shit for a while. He was like, "Fuck it, I'm going down in a blaze of glory," and then his goth or emo instinct kicked in, and it's like, "Remember, actually, no, wait, I could write poetry about this later and live another day."
In fact, he says that we were a mistake, brother. I know that now. I see it for myself in my own blundering. I see in the eyes of my mistakes which I created. There is no sense of guilt, only good intention gone bad. So he's really kind of feeling the world's piling up on him, but he's going to have to fight through it.
It's kind of emo.
I was thinking maybe more emo as well, because it's like, it's not like woe is me. It's like, I tried so hard, but I couldn't do it.
Full Linkin Park at this moment. I think he'd fit in quite well with his looks in Linkin Park, He'd definitely in a Linkin Park video. They've got that slight anime feel that we mentioned.
Yeah, it's definitely emo adjacent, but Linkin Park. But I wouldn't say they're definitely not.
No,
they're
definitely not an emo band.
Yeah.
But that song in
particular.
In there,
for sure. He's definitely had a little listen to that. If you're soaring through the sky, listening to some fucking Linkin Park crying. That's why you like it. That's why I like it up in the sky, man, because no one can see me cry. He like flies around.
I wasn't wearing all this mascara. Okay, so it's at that point he retreats with the Space Wolves. He gets them out basically. So instead of going down in a blaze of glory, they do some shenanigans and they manage to get Russ out, and they get the Force out from the barricade and kind of break in and break out, in and out, Ravenguard style. So it sounds like we're pretty confident on emo for that section of the life.
No, I think that's totally emo.
Yeah,
where like it's like, we're going to go in a blaze of, for everything else we've said, but also we're going to go in a blaze of glory. We're going to go down. We're going to die. We're going to get taken down, and then they kind of go in, save everyone, and then like run away. Like run away and hide.
It's like not quite. It's not quite committing. Like we said, like the goth's got to be a commitment.
I also think that the justification thing is is more emo than goth. Like, it wasn't like, you know, he didn't be like, I've done so many terrible things, I must like avenge myself or whatever. He's like, you know, the tried my best thing, I think, is more emo than it is goth.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Cool. So that leads us to the post-heresy blues. So he's finally built his legion back up to numbers, and then guess who comes along with his fucking Codex Astartes and goes, "Oh, I'm sorry, you've just built it back up to like numbers. You got to split it all up now into individual chapters." Old Papa Smurf. So that puts him into a bit of a mood.
So how long after the heresy is this then?
Oh, like, so basically there's not much about him after this. He gets Russ out, the heresy goes down, the Emperor's put in his throne, and he just decides that he's just going to kind of maraud and take out, you know, as much chaos as he can with the limited resources that he has, whilst the Marines are building up back home. He's involved in, like, when they take out Barbarous, when they like burn Barbarous to the ground where Mortarian's from. He's kind of in and out. There is a bit that I haven't got in my notes, but where he has a chat with Russ and Johnson, and Johnson's like, again, like the kind of alpha jock, is like, "Oh, we don't see you on the front lines very often, do we, Corax?" Russ, but because he saved Russ is on his side at that point. It's like, well, actually, like, the Space Wolves wouldn't exist without him. Like, let him into the pack.
Yeah, so that's
like, I don't really want to.
The jock's like, actually, this guy's all right. Don't judge him.
Got those friendly jock.
Yeah.
He's got the tamed jock on his side.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of that, but it's mostly just kind of hit and run stuff. And when there's big engagements, they kind of lend a hand. But he's just trying to take out as much chaos as possible in that kind of interim period before we get to much later.
Does anyone know what the Techno Viking is?
What
I remember that guy
who did the dance.
When we were talking about Corax saving Russ, I kept imagining he was the Techno Viking, and Corax and the Ravenguard were like the emos coming into the gig, and they're all like moshing.
Well, maybe that was his cybergoth phase, where him and the Techno Viking went to one of those, that weird meme where all of them under the bridge doing that rave.
Oh yes,
it's like, yeah, exactly. It's him and the Techno Viking, him and Russ, and Bjorn the Fell-handed in his fucking speaker arms on his dreadnought suit and just blasted out the tunes.
Yeah.
So he's kind of in and out.
Yeah,
for that bit, in and out of raves with the Techno Vikings, in and out of getting in the way of chaos and kind of marauding. And then, like I say, the Smurf comes along, tells everyone the legions need to break up. He doesn't like it, but he's not completely against it. I think he can see the purpose of it. But what's really getting to him is these monsters he's created, and they're getting worse and worse, the kind of mutated raptors. And he makes the final decision that what he needs to do is go and put them all down. So he goes and he kills all of these monsters that he's created. And then he locks himself in the Raven Spire and begs for mercy from the Emperor for an entire year to the day.
That is goth as face paint. That is goth as eyeliner right there. Locks himself in the Raven Spire for a year, looking for forgiveness. I mean, come on.
That's right. And not only does he lock himself in there for a year, Stoney, but when he leaves, and I think we have mentioned this before, after that year, the last words he mutters, he turns to the Raven Spire and he says, "Nevermore."
Oh yeah, full on. Yeah, there's that's some serious goth points. We've got to give him some of that for the Poe reference and everything. But like, so what kind of form are these mutations taking? Like, if these guys are getting more and more,
I think the mutations aren't getting like. I don't think it's that they're like. I don't think they're going full Cronenberg. I think they're losing their sanity more than becoming like physically worse. I think they're kind of uncontrollable. They were hard to when he goes to fight the Space Wolves, he tells them all that don't worry, like we'll be able to go and fight soon. And then basically turns around and tells them all that they can't fight, and they kind of go a bit nuts then, because they're all kind of raged and roidy because of all the chaos taint inside them. I suppose they're kind of semi-world eaters.
it feels quite goth to me, this idea of the creation turning on you. There's so many of those like old kind of like, are we playing gods kind of references in, you know, kind of gothic literature, isn't it, where they make some kind of monster. I mean, obviously Frankenstein is the obvious one where it's like, I've made a monster and I thought it was going to be good and it turned on me, and, you know, father, why have you know, like, I'm sure those, what they called these tainted Ravenguard guys called again, the Raptors. I'm sure the Raptors are like, father, why have you turned on me, as he like places a pillow over their head at night, you know, like, don't look little Jimmy or whatever. He's like, just go to Dreamland or whatever.
Well, we did have that victimized by harassing or malicious figures as part of that goth definition. And I suppose he's been victimized by, well, almost everybody. Is the Emperor not really listening to him? His brother's not really letting him into the gang. Even science turned on him by accident. You know, everything seems to have let him down. But he hasn't become a kind of face-peeling murderous psychopath like his brother. He has still remained some sense of dignity and nobility throughout all of that.
Do you think that's because he's not got much psychic ability? Like, it seems like all the Primarchs that have psychic ability get a bit fucked up by it in some way. Do you know what I mean? Like, in some ways, his psychic powers manifested themselves in the best way possible, is to be able to, like, you know, do something, just do like a cool, like, kind of little shadow trick, rather than like opening up kind of worlds of knowledge that you continually like misunderstand and fuck around with.
That's so true. I mean,
he's Darren Brown, not Professor X.
Yeah. What is the most powerful loyalist psychic Primarch?
Well, Sanguinius can see the future, can't he?
But he
that's
dies.
Part of his downfall.
I don't know if are there any psychic
but
ones
there aren't any, like,
is
I think that's a very good point.
Is what's his name, Salamander's guy, Vulcan. Is he psychic at all?
No.
Okay.
He's very good at convincing people of things, very good at philosophical arguments, apparently. But you're right, there isn't really anyone that has that. But the visions can go either way, right? Because the visions, like, Sanguinius goes one way and Kurz goes the other. But yeah, it's a good point. It's interesting that his psychic ability is basically darkness. Yeah, he still overcomes that darkness. Okay, so last section then, before we form our final opinion and total up the scores, is where is he now? What's he up to these days? Well, all that we know is that he's mutated into some kind of shadow raven monster. He's gone full anime version of what he once was. He's in the warp, hunting traitor Primarchs. He's laid siege to a word bearer's world within the warp. And he's found Demon Lorgar and fucked up Demon Lorgar, just like he fucked up real Lorgar. But Demon Lorgar escaped through some kind of gate. And then he shouts something along the lines of, I'm going to come slap you again, bitch. And that's the last.
Doesn't he know the taste of him or something? The smell of him?
He knows his taste. He knows his smell. He knows every inch of him.
He's got one of his t-shirts. He's got one of his t-shirts. He sleeps with it at night. Like,
He also seemingly has the ability to not just turn into actual shadow, but to turn into like a flock of raven shadows.
Well,
he's gone.
That's
full Super
that's
Saiyan.
goth. Come on, turning into a flock of ravens is goth as shit.
I think
it does raise a kind of a weird question though, because like, if he was to come back, like, and he like, because obviously he still kind of serves the Emperor, but he's also a twisted mutant Birdman. Like,
that'd be great.
How would that like go in the lore? You know, and then also, how does it work in the lore that the rest of the Ravenguard are still allowed to operate whilst they're on the side of the Imperium, when they I guess, do they know that their Primarchs turned into like a big mutant Birdman?
Well, he can still represent himself as himself, can't he? He's not always stuck as. He can kind of go between the two.
I'd imagine
versions of
he
himself.
can, but it is interesting, and I think the most interesting possible Primarch return. Like, if you could pick any of the Primarchs to return, his is the most interesting because it's the one that throws up the most questions, like you've just said, Stoney. He's essentially gives credence to Matt's endless theory of good demons and saints being demons. What is he? if he isn't currently a demon, or is he just surviving in the warp and everything else around him is kind of his will portrayed in the warp, and as soon as he steps out of the warp back into real space, he just looks normal again? I guess you don't really know, but his return would be the hardest for 40k lore to explain, and therefore I think probably one of the least likely, despite Gav's best efforts.
He has slowly turned more and more into a music video as this episode has gone on. It's very you can imagine it's when he's turning into the flock of ravens.
Yeah,
that is
absolutely.
like a
and I think maybe even in the warp, a flock of black ravens against the coloured emo sky, it makes it even hit home even harder.
That is like a late 90s music video.
Oh yeah, for sure. If he could if the only other thing, the more 90s music video thing, the only other power he could have that would be more 90s music video is if he could like suddenly turn into like a black orb that fell to the floor and shattered into a million pieces.
Gentlemen, I've totaled up the scores and I think it's gone the way I predicted, but it turns out that Corax, the deliverer, according to us, the Large Blast podcast, and our very clever alchemy of our computer, is a goth.
So there we have it, my precious darklings. Corvus Corax is goth after all. Now let's head over to the Raven Spire for an exclusive interview.
Congratulations! Are you as excited as I am?
By the sounds of it, no.
Oh no! What are we gonna do?
I'm sure we'll get there eventually. It's a bit early, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess it is. Maybe we just need a few drinks.
I don't really see anything.
Oh no! What are we gonna do?
I feel very, very uncomfortable about being who I am.
So welcome everybody to this part of the show where Lady Luck, the great stats in the sky, determine what we're going to be talking about by use of the company dice. We're going to generate a topic with the random topic generator. Welshie, I believe you have the dice freed from its radon case.
And it's a 4. It is. What annoys you most when you are painting? What's the one thing that really grinds your gears, gets under your skin when you're trying to paint?
What's the worst thing about painting? Maybe even hobbying as well. Maybe we put that in there, like putting kits together and things too. Maybe, but yeah, I don't know. What's the thing that annoys you guys the most?
I think kits. You just threw that kit in, and I got a visceral reaction to scraping mold lines. I hate scraping mold lines.
Yeah,
that's funny. That's funny that you said that. I find that I end up basing models very quickly so that I can play with them. So some of my Bretonian knights I are base coated from when we had the big Warhammer festival like years ago, and I hadn't taken the mold lines off. The thing I hate is when you do all the basing, you go to paint the model, and there's like the mold lines are still there. I hate that, and I never rework into them. I'm like, I can't be bothered. I've sat down to paint this model. I'm going to start this. I paint the model.
I'm the same with drilling gun barrels. I've got a squad of 5 dudes, and I noticed that one of the 5 I didn't drill the barrel. I'm not going to go back and drill it, but I'm going to get really angry at myself for having not drilled it previously.
I still don't know why GW don't cast gun barrels with a little like hole in the
dimple.
End. So so strange. Some
do. The odd one these days seems to, but it's certainly not the majority. So that's modeling. Painting wise, what winds me up painting wise? Contrast paints wind me up. When you get a dark contrast paint, you accidentally get a little blob of dark contrast on an area that you're painting as light contrast, and it's almost impossible to get it back so that it's not noticeable. You can try painting back to the base coat on that segment, but then that segment looks slightly different. That I find that's quite annoying. A little drip of dark contrast on a light area.
You know what really pisses me off is when you the new paint pots, the newest version of the paint pots, because I bought some paints recently to do some paint that Escher model thing, and And yeah, and I was just looking through some of my old paints, like, oh, I've still got loads of paints. This is great. And then you open one up and you're like, this piece of shit dried out. So at some point I didn't like push the rim down all the way or something.
Yeah.
And it's all dried out. And that's really annoying.
Yeah, crusting in the paint holes is annoying. I know that what I should do is buy the paints and put them all into those nice little dropper bottles that all the people on YouTube has, but I just can't be asked. Put a little ball bearing in it. I just want the hexagon paint pots with the screw top lids back. Just give me a good old fashioned screw top lid, hard plastic. There we are. I think that's enough things that we've moaned about. Very emo of us. Fits in with the episode nicely.
Yeah. I can tell you since we've been recording, I've just sold my Ravenguard poster.
Oh, boom.
Was it to me?
Weird. Did you buy it?
Did you offer me it?
Yeah, Welsh's phone gets a notification like your bids on the Ravenguard poster have been successful.
The
Well, the other things, brushes.
Brushes annoy me. Suck.
Brushes just in general annoy me.
Yeah, I completely agree. Fine brushes fucking suck. They might as well be called get one use out of this piece of shit before it bananas up and becomes completely unusable. Piece of shit.
Absolutely. The Games Workshop dry brushes are crap. Now I've got this Artis Opus one, and we're not sponsored by them. I'm saying all this for free. I've never looked back to the stupid square dry brush. Instantly a solid block. And also, Games Workshop, work out a way to stop contrast paints ruining your brush. Because the whole concept of not letting the paint go more than 2/3 up your brush just doesn't work with contrast paints. You dunk it in and it's straight up in the metal bit. You've got a solid block. It's so difficult to clean. There's got to be a brush you can design that stops the contrast paint getting sucked all the way to the top.
Yeah, work it out, Games Workshop. We started off fairly positive on that. No, actually, we didn't. We've had a really negative show. We've been very negative all show, but I'm keeping it up. Sort it out, Games Workshop. Stop charging so much for your brushes because they're not that great.
I'm on star time, so leave me alone.
Cool. Welcome back, everybody, to this Lords of Law quiz, which kind of serendipitously, I guess, I'm going to do a quiz about the negatives, the things that are wrong. The worst stuff like that, you see. So here's how this is going to work. The first question is, who is the emperor? But I want you to give the wrongest answer. Like the most wrong answer wins.
Who is the emperor?
Who is the emperor?
The Silent King.
He's just the Silent King, the emperor.
He's just the Silent King.
Okay, that's pretty wrong.
I was going to say, who isn't the emperor?
We are all the emperor inside.
Alive.
Right. I think the emperor is more alive than he is the Silent King. So I'm going to give a point to Welshie for that one.
Yes.
Okay.
Excellent. I love being wrong.
Okay. So again, wrong answer only. But why was GW called out 2 years ago by Vice magazine? Wrong answer only. For being pro-animal abuse because of the fur on the characters, from a disgruntled employee's Twitter rant, or is it because of the Donald Trump meme of the Emperor, where he's like the Emperor but with the Donald Trump head?
I think the middle one.
Yeah, I also think the middle one. I know the first one's
wrong?
True, and I think the last one could be.
I think the middle one's wrong. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you're both right then. Yes, it's the Donald Trump one. Apparently, is the right answer. Everyone got pissed off because apparently they started posting Donald Trump memes and people, got political in the comments or whatever. And Vice wrote a big article about how us 40k fans are all horrible alt-right bastards. So there we go. Wrong answers only. Okay, worst impression of an orc.
Oh, I stubbed my toe.
Oh, that was. I was going to try and do an impression of a. What are they called? It's the pointy-eared aliens, an elf in space.
Oh, an Eldar.
An Eldar, yeah.
Well, she basically just did it.
Yeah. So I'll do that. I'll try and think of something else quickly. Can you say the question again?
Okay, so worst impression of an orc.
That was my impression.
Oh, what? They're doing nothing.
Yeah. Because
Oh, come on. It's an audio medium. At least just go like.
all right. So surrender.
All right, well, it's pretty even Stevens here. I'm sorry, listeners at home. I didn't realise that this quiz was going to be this bad, but I'm going to have to go. I'm going to go with, I think, Matt, just because of how unorky your delivery was. I'm going to give you a point for that one. Okay.
I was so quick off the mark.
Lightning fast. So, okay, so this again, one question only. Last question, as you know, is worth 17 billion points. Okay. Who was voted the least grimdark character in a Kiora thread I was reading just before the show? Wrong answers only. Was it the Avatar of Cain? Was it Trazin the Infinite? Or was it Shadow Strike?
Trazin.
So we're picking the...
You got wrong answer. You need to do the wrong answer.
So the one that's most grimdark.
So, so they had a quiz, right, where they voted on who the least grimdark person was.
Yeah.
And it was one of these people.
But we want the wrong answer, so we want the most grimdark.
Or whoever you think would be the most grimdark. Sometimes you don't have a lot of time to put together a
Avatar of
quiz,
Cain.
Avatar of Cain. Okay, and Matt, what did you say?
Trazin.
You said Trazin. Well, Welshie, you were right, because they did vote Trazin the Infinite as the least grimdark person. So
that's what I said. All right, yeah.
Yeah, but then you picked the right one then,
What?
didn't you?
Not what? More than Shadow Sun?
I don't know. All right, it's over.
I'm gonna find this Kiora.
That's it. I'm walking out. I'm gonna have a tantrum. I'm gonna go put some MCR on. It is not okay.
All right, no one wins. You know what? I'm going to win this. Quiz. I'm giving myself the 10,000 points. I'm going on the board.
Did you?
So there we have it.
It sounded like you had another. It sounded like you had more questions. Did you have more questions?
No, it sounded wrong. All right, it's over. It's done. All right, I'm storming off. If anyone wants me, I'll be in the Raven Tower. I'll see you guys all next time. Say goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Yeah.